Well, thank you for joining us, myself and my colleague Navarro-Génie, who's a think tank person who's familiar with many of the issues that we're dealing with on the Western story. What we're doing is looking at the West as a distinct society, as you will, that a part of the country that has some unique concerns and some unique aspirations. Aspirations which need to be recognized and addressed if the West is to remain a contented region within the Federation. One of the things we've looked at as an aspiration of Western Canada particularly is to see the natural resource sectors, energy, agriculture, mining, forestry, and the fishery, recognized and treated as fundamental building blocks of the Western and the Canadian economy, not as relics from the past or economic dinosaurs on their way to extinction. And we've looked at, last little time, we looked at agriculture and we looked at energy, especially the size of those sectors and their importance and what can be done to get them more recognized and more fairly treated. We talked to John Simpson on the agricultural front and David Yeager on the energy, particularly the petroleum front. And if you want to look at those, you can go to thewesternstory.ca and just look at podcast 2.0, 2.1, and 2.2. But before we get going today, Marco, do you want to just briefly summarize what we heard from the fellows on agriculture and energy?
Yes. Hello. One of the things that we heard from agriculture, of course, is not only that agriculture is one of the fundamental building blocks of the Canadian economy and Canadian society as a whole, but that we don't seem to have a great deal of a handle on how much it actually generates, that it is a significantly larger segment of the Canadian economy that normally is accounted for, given the ways in which, for example, Statistics Canada tends to aggregate some of these.
Well, a lot of people just when you think of agriculture, they think of farms and cattle. They don't think of the manufacturing sector that's built on that. They don't think of the service sector. They don't think of the knowledge and technology sectors. And that's what your point is. If you add those all in, it's a lot bigger.
And similarly, I guess one could say for the energy industry, there is more than just oil and gas in the industry, but it is the single largest sector of the Canadian economy on its own. And it doesn't even rival the two or three that follow below it combined. So it is a significant portion of the economic world in which we live.
Well, what we want to look, we're looking at the natural resources sectors generally, but today we particularly want to look at the mining sector and the forestry sector. Our guests are free to say whatever they want to say, but those two are fundamental building blocks of the economy. And to do this, we want to welcome several guests that have enormous experience in these sectors and get their view not only on the importance of those sectors, but what can be done to get them more officially and favorably recognized and treated. And so to start with, we're happy to welcome Jeff Stibbard. Jeff is the founder and CEO of JDS Energy and Mining. I think he's had 30 years of experience in mining development and operation. He's led the development and operation of mining projects around the world. I think I'm right, Jeff, in saying copper, gold, diamonds. And then more at home, he was a general manager of Albion Sands Energy in Fort McMurray, as well as a founding member of Western Oil Sands. And Jeff's received numerous awards for his activities and accomplishments in the private sector, and particularly in the mining sector. And he's also an honorary colonel, I believe, of the Canadian Air Force. So, Jeff, we're very pleased to have the chance to chat with you, and welcome to the Western Story.
Well, good afternoon, guys, and thanks for the invitation. I really appreciate participating here today.
So we'll get right at it, Jeff. Maybe you can give us your perspective on just the importance of the natural resources sectors to the BC economy. Jeff is located in British Columbia, but to the Western economy as a whole, to the Canadian economy as a whole. And then maybe specifically tell us about the importance and the magnitude of the mining sector.
Sure. Well, I guess from a big to small in Canada, the simplest stat I can say for the mining industry in Canada, we're 1 out of every 29 jobs in the country is in our industry. And then to get it more relevant, I guess, about 400,000 Canadians make their living directly in the mining business, and about 350,000 indirectly supporting us as contractors and trades, et cetera. And we contribute about $110 billion to the Canadian GDP. So that's pretty significant, and maybe not as big as the grain guys and the agricultural space that we're just hearing you talk about, but we're pretty significant. Another interesting stat that's significant in today's day and age is we're the largest employer of Indigenous people in Canada.
Okay.
So 16,000 First Nations people show up to work directly in our business, which represents...
Is that mainly in British Columbia, or is
that's
across
Canada, but really it means British Columbia and Northern Canada. So think Yukon, Northwest Territories, Northern Ontario, Northern Quebec. But that's 2/3 of all First Nations work in the mining industry. So that's relevance. You want to talk about jobs, GDP, and getting what we call now reconciliation with First Nations. This is the self-funding model that built Canada. It was important to us before. It's what built the country. It's what pushed the railways all the way across to British Columbia and into the north. But it's really built the communities, the 200 and some odd communities in British Columbia that really make their living because of the resource industry. And I'm not just talking about the Vancouvers. We all know Vancouver, if it wasn't for the resource industry, and whether it's grain, oil and gas, or the mining, the port facility here would be empty. There's only so many inbound container cargo boxes you can get from China. The rest going out of this place is resource industry, and mining's a big part of it. Right over my shoulder is the harbor, looking across the Vancouver wharves, which again is one of the biggest exporters of mineral product from British Columbia and across the world, as you know, or across the country, sorry. We're producers of copper here, primarily in British Columbia. Copper, gold, silver, lead, zinc is what we do here in British Columbia. And as we get towards the Rockies, obviously coal, met coal. We're one of the world's largest provider of metallurgical coal to the steelmaking industry. Some 25 million tons of coal is shipped out through British Columbia ports from the Rockies, and then crossing the border into the potash of Saskatchewan, and then uranium, et cetera, in northern Saskatchewan, and then into the nickel belt there into the Manitoba region. So a lot of that stuff is all coming west here, and that's really what Vancouver is built on, is the funnel to the rest of the world from our resources.
Jeff, can you elaborate a little bit? Like I'm a prairie boy, so when it comes to mining, I think, oh yeah, they're digging something out of the ground. But there's a lot more to that sector than the producing end. There's processing, manufacturing, servicing, knowledge, technology. Can you elaborate a little bit on the magnitude of the sector if you include those other aspects of it,
and the financing aspects of it.
So just again, on those two stats, there's about 400,000 direct jobs, the people that work in the mining business for the mining company, and there's another 350,000 indirect jobs that are directly, indirectly supporting the mines as say fabrication, equipment suppliers, et cetera, that do that. And then there's another probably derivative or two after that for the accountants and the lawyers that are partially connected to the business. But the most important part is that in our industry, roughly 29% of the people in that space, those numbers I just rattled off, 29% of the people are actually in the mine, touching the mine. The rest of the people are professionals at the mine site in procurement, engineering, project management, et cetera. So there's a huge sphere of, call it, inclusiveness of everybody's skill set. So I was a miner when I was a kid. I started out and I was a little bit different looking than when I'm looking here today. And actually, when I go home on the weekends to my home in Kelowna, I look like I used to. I put my work clothes on and I go weld in my shop and I go do my things that I started out in. But yeah, so the technology that's applied to the mining industry is huge. As a matter of fact, in Canada, the mining industry is the largest user, and that means biggest check writer for technology of all the industries in Canada. And so you'd say, well, that's crazy. What about aerospace and all that? No, we do. So when you think mining, also think Fort McMurray oil sands, which I was a part of building one of the largest oil sands plants in Fort McMurray, the Shell Albion Sands, which is now, I think, a Suncor CNRL asset. And that was moving 450,000 tons a day of material oil to be ground up at heat and made into oil. But our technology, we use the largest equipment in the world, largest haul trucks, largest shovels, largest processing machinery, all controlled by data and programs. And so we didn't use a lot of apps back then in 2004. And so the app world, that's now another industry, but we used technology of process controls, managing the efficiency of the operation, the safety of the operation. So the mining business is just not that old gray, black and white picture you see on pub walls in old small towns. It's really modern. As a matter of fact, you think about, the cell phone and how it's evolved over 30 years, how fast we've gone from the Apple, or how we come to the Apple. I don't even know. I don't own an Apple, but I think there's like 12 or 13 or 15 versions of that. We started out with that thing called BlackBerry only 30 years ago. And the mining business is the same way. In the last 30 years, our adaptation to technology, and similar to the Apple phone development, is exactly the same. And our efficiency of production, which primarily drives our energy costs down, energy use, our safety improvements, obviously, and our productivity. So those are things that we use. And of course, we need the people to do that, which pushes out to all of Canada. So we're very inclusive in terms of other provinces participating in our economy out west here. Things like the 29,000 people in Quebec that work in oil sands, building parts, the largest user of Prevost buses built in Quebec, Fort McMurray, Alberta. So, we're real and we're relevant. And quite frankly, we're an awesome place to be. It takes all comers.
Now, Jeff, what about what are the concerns of that sector with respect, looking particularly to the future? Are there obstacles to its continued and expanded development? Are there what things worry the participants in that sector, particularly maybe looking at government policy or public attitudes or something else?
Sure. So both of those things, and actually there's really three things. There's obviously public policy, political will, and the C-48 and the C-69 bills that are really hampering development, stretching the timeline out and adding cost and kind of just making it difficult for money to come here. One of our biggest problems that we're seeing here since 2015, and I'm not too sure what critical event happened in politics in 2015, but I bet you could guess. And we've lost a lot of capital, some 40% decline of capital coming into Canada to build these projects because they're big. And that's a decline because people aren't sure about what we're going to do with our resource development business going forward. Access to the permitting and the other thing that's really critical, staying out of the political side, is the people. Getting the people to want to participate in our industry and getting people that have the will to accept a role in the mining business because they don't really understand it. So we're probably not great on promoting our industry to the people that need it here mostly, is the young people, and the young people from all across Canada, because most of our mines are north in their more remote areas. So we pretty well tap out the local communities pretty fast. We definitely, people like myself who grew up here in Vancouver, left here as an 18-year-old kid to go to the Northwest Territories and to never come back, to basically live in 12 separate communities in the country to build mines. And it was that inspired me, and I keep trying to inspire others. It's an adventure, and it's a phenomenal experience to go across the country and live in different communities and learn different cultures, both provincially, socioeconomically, and of course with our First Nations. You get a whole different perspective than what you do from down here in the city. So our challenge in our industry is to get people from the lower part of our country to understand there's great fun and opportunity in Northern Canada. And again, remembering that more than 50% of the country is above the 60th parallel. And not.
Yeah, and Jeff, to what extent are Indigenous people and Indigenous communities a potential source for the human resources that industry needed? You mentioned at the beginning that a large number of Indigenous people already participate in the sector. Is there more that could be done or should be done to increase that participation?
Yes, absolutely. And again, when you look at the population, the most rapidly expanding population is First Nations communities in Canada. So there's a great source. As I mentioned, some 16,000 First Nations work in our industry. 2/3 of every First Nation works in our industry. So they're actually quite adapted to our industry. Part of it is because they're primarily the people that live in those communities. So that's the great source. We want more. And we got to show people, we don't want you just to come as a pair of hands. We need your head. Most importantly, we need your heart. And that's the part that we got to work on and show people and get the message in a more positive, enticing, exciting, not just good money, because I want to expand on that as well. The people in our industry, mining is the highest paid industrial business in the country. We're more than twice the nearest business in terms of pay scale. The average pay scale in our industry is $126,000 a year. And that's anywhere you work in the mining business. So you can make $126,000 a year in Williams Lake, BC. That's a pretty good salary. Remember, that's just average. They're going up from there as you get experience. So we want to entice people that there's a good living. The cost of living in these small communities is very, very favorable to, say, somewhere down here in Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, etc. So there's a great way to kind of get ahead and get your stake. And those are the messages we want to get across. The people in those small communities, they get it. They like it. They like living there. They like making that cash, not paying a lot for a house and having a lot of disposable income to go buy the luxury items that, snowmobiles and pickup trucks and all that cool fun stuff. So that's the kind of things that we have to get across to get more people understanding it. But we do need people to move from the south to the north. It's not good enough just to talk about it and digitize it. We still need that 20% population to go participate with us right at the mine site. So we do.
Is there anything that governments can do to? Well, you mentioned those two concerns: the difficulty of attracting capital, or the uncertainty in Canada is actually driving capital away, and the difficulty in getting the human resources that sector needs. Are there things that government can do or stop doing to?
One is stop. Kind of. Putting out I'd say an underinformed or misinformed thing. We talk about carbon taxes. That's the way to solve our problem. And that's really hampering our industry, obviously. It drives investment away. If we're going to talk about carbon footprint, let's look at what we can do. By the way, the mining business in Canada has the lowest carbon footprint of any other mining jurisdiction around the world. So we do it right here in Canada, and we should be telling that positive story, not the negative story that if you come here, we're going to tax you more. So stop on that side of it. Yes, we're committed to making the world a better place, a cleaner place, and focusing on the ESG in particular, the carbon side. But taxing it out of business doesn't help. We need to push those dollars into technology, into education. That's the key things. We need to continue to advance our capabilities, as I mentioned earlier, to technology, to run the mine, to keep it clean, to keep it safe, and enhance people's understanding of the mine, that this is a good career, that you don't have to go down into the dark and be like the seven dwarves and bang away by hand. Yeah. We're in modern machinery down here, and there's great experiences to be out there. And the health and safety is awesome.
On that point, Jeff, if I may, you mentioned education, and we were talking earlier, of course, about availability of labor and that kind of stuff. Can you maybe say a little bit about the amount of education and training that is required? I assume that there are some difficulties there, given the propensity of Canadians to just want to go to university and get a bachelor's degree as opposed to getting a different type of training. And how hard is it to attract people into the industry and to bring them north?
Sure, a couple things there. So yeah, it's training, but the training is almost like you've got them once you start the training. If you've got people's brains, if they've signed up for the training, it's getting people's brains to want to go train. And so that's the bigger issue. So we've got a big job ahead of us. And quite frankly, this is what my focus is really as a business and my family, because it's a family business. I got my 2 sons working for me in the business. The people that are working in this company are most of my friends and their sons and family members. My wife is in the business. She's a teacher, so was a teacher in most of these small communities. We understand that, but we've got to get people to kind of come and explore our industry. So we've got big projects like the Britannia mine down the road from Vancouver on the way to Whistler. It's a 100-year-old facility that we've turned into a mining museum, but an education center of excellence for mining for young kids that we send. Actually, this week, there's a big program here at the Mining Association, British Columbia, educating teachers so that we can get elementary school kids fired up on the business and that they can ask those questions of their parents. Like, what are we doing? How did we get here? What did our grandparents do? What's up? Getting exploratory in their brain to want to understand and then come to us for training. And then, of course, the mining business, I think, is very good training people on the tools, in addition to obviously the universities that we have here in Canada and actually across the line, United States. We've got great education on mining and mining technology, but the small community colleges where we can break the training down into elements, so it's not arduous. If you came from a smaller community, maybe didn't finish high school, that doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to be excel in the mining business. A lot of our businesses learned on the job, and we move up the ranks by doing our job, being responsible, not getting hurt. And that's how we get promoted. It's not necessarily because we all came out here with masters of some sort of engineering or sciences degree. It's learning on the job and learning how to work as a team and being complementary to the team effort. So we have a really good way in the mining business to bring people along once they're in our program. We do want to work with smaller community colleges and tailor their education to be more bite-sized chunks, 3, 4, 6-week programs on how to get into the business. Once you cross that threshold, hey, we'll take you from here. We really like moving people up through the ranks, because once we've got them in there, they tend not to leave us. Again, it's hard to get off this drug of success, both financial exploration and traveling around the world and meeting people. I'm like I said, that's why I'm doing it still in this business. I'm here for the lifestyle. Earning a living is living, and that's really
learning lots of cool stuff by the sounds of it.
Pardon me?
And learning lots of cool stuff by the sounds of it.
Absolutely. Like I mentioned, we all started out as miners, even you folks there in the prairies. I bet you, you had a sandbox and you dug a hole and you dug a hole until it got so deep it started to cave in. That's the first lesson in mining engineering right there. So we all started as miners. Some of us just never left the sandbox, and I'm trying to the business. It is a sandbox. It's super cool. We work with some very cool equipment, and again, it's a safe business. We're a very safe business. We're a very lucrative business and a friendly business with respect to
this has been very informative, Jeff, and want to thank you for it. We want to end up on one particular question. We've put this to all our guests. And Marco's heard me so often on this, he's going to leave. But I worry, and of course, from a political background, that in this country we substitute discussion, debate, writing about it, conferencing about it, tweeting about it, Facebooking about podcasting about it. We substitute discussion for action. And so my last question to you is, if there's people that are viewing this podcast and they agree with a lot of what you've said, what can we've talked about what the government can do or what the government cannot do to help the situation, but what can people out there do if they want to promote and support mining in particular as a fundamental building block of the...
what would be the call to action?
Yeah, what would be the call to action?
Well, one is the political level, and just research and understand what people are telling you. If they're telling you they're going to tax you more and restrict access, you got to think about that, And the other thing is to dissect the information. When people talk about, say, global warming and GHGs and saying they want to convert to a battery economy, think about where does the power come from originally, and follow it back through the pipeline or the power line to where it originates, and recognize if you want that Tesla car battery economy, we're going to have metals, nickel, copper, zinc, cobalt, etc. It's got to come from somewhere. And quite frankly, it comes from here. And we do it best, as I mentioned, better than anywhere else on the planet. So if you want that new age thing, explore where it's got to come from and how it gets there, and how we as Canadians can really make a positive impact and effect on that, and get fired up on moving the modern economy. Like we're talking about today, I think here we're sort of over the 55-year-old threshold. At least I can say that for myself. We're really trying to get to the 25 or even the 15-year-old threshold. We got to find those people that care about the economy or the climate, and connect it to the economy, and then show them where all the pieces come from. And eventually it ends up at a power source, which might not be pretty. It might be a coal-fired power plant that they seem to rail against. It might be a natural gas. However, it could be from British Columbia in a hydroelectricity or thermal electricity or wind power, but that's fine. But the components have to come from somewhere. The distribution of energy has to come from somewhere. So if you want to really make it green and positive, you got to participate. We need you. We need your brain. As I mentioned earlier, we need your hands, brain, most importantly, your heart. Tell us what you believe in. And we're not too far apart. I don't even think we're apart at all. You know, mining guys and girls have been major supporters of the environment, because we live in these remote places. We like where we live. We're not trying to ruin it. So I think getting the alignment for the young people from our experiences and showing them we're just not old gray guys hacking it out underground. It's a cool place. So getting on to, I think for us, taking a podcast like this and finding a place to insert it that's getting a lot of hits. And again, I'm the wrong guy to talk about this. I don't know where that is, but to get it into the talk groups, the schools, young kids, and again, tracking down young kids and bring them into tours, which we do here in our office and in the mines, and getting them to ask questions. What did your teacher tell you about greenhouse gases? How are we going to solve it? Let's go into the derivative components and find out what we as Canadians can actually do. We can do a lot. You know, it's like exporting LNG. We can do more for the world's global warming by exporting LNG to China and reducing GHGs by 6% versus shutting down all of Canada and only reducing it 1.6%. So we've got to get that message out there that moving forward is a good thing, and we can do it in the same passionate way that the young people are talking about, but we need to show them the way. It's like the cell phone, and if you had a cell phone, you know, there's probably 32 different elements to make it up. 2 of them are mined right here in Canada. And so those are things that, you know, this is so integral to our existence. People need to ask the deeper question. Where did it come from? Was it any good where it was mined, or is it better mined here? Dealing with health and safety issues. Do you want to get cobalt from the Congo, or do you want to get cobalt from Sudbury, Ontario? You know, I can tell you there's a big difference in the socioeconomic, safety, and environmental practices.
Well, we want to thank you, Jeff. You've given us a lot of information. You've given our viewers a lot of information. So we want to thank you for this. We're going to roll this into a collective podcast and use it to try to get across this message that the natural resource sectors, and in your case, mining, is a fundamental building block of the country and a building block for the future, not some relic for the past. So I want to thank you for this, and we'll keep in touch.
Well, thanks, guys, and keep up the good work. Very much appreciate being a part of it. I think you got a great thing going here.
Okay, thanks,
Jeff.
All right,
bye.
See ya.